by thanking the Austrian anti-fascist comrades here for standing up against the FPO and standing against Hoffa. When the news went of him standing went round the world, the picture of fuck the Nazis as well, the picture behind him went round the world as well. And it's an important start, because I think the key for the Nazis is the despair that they can bring. And I'll say why the movements are developing now. And I think we're in critical times. And I want to say that last week I was in Poland. I was at Auschwitz. Our organisation has an annual trip to Auschwitz. And people, that's where, when we went there, we went with the daughter of a survivor from the camps. I see we're surrounded by the picture of the Roma Holocaust as well, that we have a position of never again, and we don't forget. But we have to understand very carefully about the fascists and analyse them very, very carefully in order to stop them. Forgive me, I'm a child of imperialism and my language skills are poor. And I'm trying to learn German, and I will learn German and French over the next couple of years. And so please bear with me for my lack of proper understanding of language. But I do think that we're at the heart of a great debate. There's a quote that says, "The old is dying and the new cannot yet be born," that we face polarised situation. And in the UK, I went on my first anti-fascist demonstration when I was 12 years old. I won't tell you how old I am. But I went on demonstration when the National Front, the Front National, who helped to shape the National Front in France, had the biggest group inside Europe in the 70s. They had the biggest group. And each time, we have seen a manifestation of the fascists. And what we had to do was analyse how they're growing. The first thing to say is there's 6 areas that we have to discuss. The first is how are they opening up? What's led to their opening up? It's a dual problem, one of crisis and also one of racism. And I would say that state racism is playing an important part. What do I mean by state racism? I mean by Donald Trump. There's a man called Stiglitz, and he said that Donald Trump was a fascist. I think it's important to analyse a disease very, very carefully. If somebody says you have a cold, and somebody says you have cancer, they are very different diseases and you have to treat them differently. And for the anti-fascist movement, analysing what we've been faced with has helped us to defeat the National Front, the British National Party, the street movements that have come afterwards, by treating them, by carefully analysing them, and also by having activity, by never despairing. I'll start off with state racism, because when you look at fascist movements classically, I'm talking about Mussolini and Hitler. If you look at the fascist movement in Italy in 1922, it didn't essentially use racism as its core motivator and organising. It was the aftermath of the First World War and the crisis that was preparing in the run-up to the Wall Street crash. The difference between Germany and France was the nature of their societies. Germany was a very advanced society. It had a very deep democracy. It had a very well-organised working class. In order to do that, fascism is a mass movement. It has to present itself as a mass movement of people compared to anything else. But when I say we were Auschwitz, the difference between the Nazi movement and other movements is that they smash all forms of democracy. They will use any means, they will tell any lies in order to get into a position. I would say that I want to talk about the state racism, open Nazis like Jobbik and Golden Dawn, Euro-fascist, those people that hide who they are, like the Front National and like the British National Party, racist populist. In the UK, I don't know if you've heard of a man called Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is not a Nazi, but he's a racist. What's interesting about all these racists is they say they're not. They say, I don't like black people, I don't like people that are immigrants, I don't like people speaking other languages, but I'm not a racist. They don't get to self-define, right? That's what it is, being a racist. If it says those kind of things, it's a racist. The difference between looking at each group is important. And then you have street movements, like Pegida, like the English Defence League, and what we're witnessing now across Europe is what I call cross-pollination between the groups. You see, Pegida marches, opens up the space, and the FBO takes that space electorally. So they use different roads. The Nazis use electoral roads, and they also use, in terms of taking to the streets. It's important that both are blocked. I would say that an important element of the polarisation has been the growth of Islamophobia, the growth of racism. It's interesting that when you read the front pages, the Nazis had a newspaper in Germany, and you read the front page of 119 of their major selling ones, all of them start off with the crisis. All of them talk about how people have been hit with the crisis, and a small element of it is what I describe as anti-Semitism. And the reason why I say that is not to deny that there was anti-Semitism in the Nazis, it's to understand how they use anti-Semitism and why why racism is so central to them today. And they used anti-Semitism to hold together their organisation, the leaders, the cadre of their organisation, and it was part of their movement. But today, the racist populists and the Nazis is much more central to their movement because of they're trying to build a mass movement, but they also face the stink of the Holocaust. One of the things you notice about somebody who has a fascist past, you know the cornflower, right? They just say, it's a cornflower, yeah? The swastika is an Asian good luck symbol. No, it's not. It's a symbol of the Nazis. And part of what's happened to them is the stench from the murder of 6 million Jews, of the murder of the Roma, the murder of LGBT community, the destruction of women, the destruction of the Social Democrat Party, means that they have to reinvent themselves, they have to deny their past. And that's what they do inside the FBO, don't they? When you say they're fascist, they say we're not fascist, but we just happen to wear the symbol and support a symbol that goes back to the Waffen SS. As long as you do that, what they're trying to do is disarm our side. So in Britain, the BNP said we're not Nazis, Nick Griffin was their leader, but the Holocaust didn't happen. The reason why he denied the Holocaust was because he wanted to repeat it, but he knew that saying that the Holocaust didn't happen, or saying that he couldn't break with the Holocaust because he wanted to keep together his Nazi core. The job of us was to expose them. When they first stood, people laughed at them. They said they're not going to get anywhere. But you know what actually happened? Their vote went up between 2001 consecutively until they got 1 million votes. They had 60 councillors. They had 2 MEPs. They had thousands of pounds that were coming from the European Parliament, and they were a severe threat. And there were 2 responses. One group of people said ignore them. Just ignore them. They'll destroy themselves. Another group of people said we've got to beat them up. But the Euro-fascist strategy was to remove all the insignia. They didn't wear any swastikas, they put suits on. They appeared to be respectable. They wanted to stand next to respectable people. Look at what the FBO do. They try and make deals inside the party with respectable parties in order to get respectability. Our job is all the time to expose it. So everywhere they went, we were there with a placard next to him. He's a racist, he's a Nazi, he's an Islamophobe. Everywhere they went, we tried to make sure that they didn't go. They chose the electoral route, they didn't march. So you had, that tactic was to put leaflets out. We produced millions of leaflets. In fact, one of the things we did was when they went to an area and said that if you were African or Muslim, you would get a house compared to the local people. So we went there and we had a group of black people go, can I have a house? Right? Of course we didn't get a house, it was a lie. But as Goebbels says, if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big lie. So what you see with the British National Party was we had to mobilise people. As we mobilised, we faced a couple of problems. Firstly, we went round with a Social Democratic MP. But because they're Nazis, they physically attacked the Labour Party. You know, the people leafleting, they physically attacked the MP who wanted to be there. So we had to have a united right for the person to go out and leaflet. You know what's interesting about that? The person that stood against her turned out to be the chief inspector of the local police station. He'd been there for 10 years. So there's a kind of, I don't believe he suddenly joined the BNP, he'd been in the BNP all along. The question is, but I'm not arguing that the police, by the way, are Nazis, I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing that what happened is that sometimes they don't openly come out and they operate on that basis, and then they sometimes come out and it's difficult to expose them. We had to use different tactics. We got women, the mums in the schools, went outside the schools with their black Muslim outside the schools and leafleted and said we want our children to be able to play together without being attacked. Not a mass demo, but outside every school in that borough, Griffin lost the election. We went to every school because the schools were much more integrated and waited 3 years before the next child would be able to vote. So they were 15 and we worked in the schools until the people were 18. The vote for the Nazis went up actually in the local area, but the vote against them went even higher because we'd organised young people that were much more integrated and much more progressive about this in order to defeat them. The Nazis had to go forward in order to do that. And we had big arguments. Some people said, just beat them up. Well, maybe that, I'll tell you a secret. I wasn't sad if that actually happened to me, right? But it's not the tactic. It wouldn't have worked. What worked was exposing them for what they were on that basis. And we never let them march. They called a couple of marches and we called counter demonstrations against them. The Nazis themselves said, if we call a march, the left will be much bigger than us and we will not look strong. And Hitler said, if you want to build a mass movement, you have to turn a small man into being a mighty dragon. You can't be the master race if lots of people stand inside your way. It took a long time, months of work. We had to have mass pop concerts. We had to convince people to speak out. It was painstaking work. But the start of it was for people to simply turn around and name Nick Griffin as a Nazi. That's the start of it. Because then he had to defend, he had a choice. If he turned on the Nazi tradition, his own supporters got demoralised. And that was part of what happened. The racist populist, people like Nigel Farage, if you notice, they're the largest vote in the European vote, in the European election. Nigel Farage topped the poll. And another feature of this is the failure of the old parties. The Social Democratic Party vote went down, and the Conservative Party went down, and they became part of the party of protest. What were they protesting about? They turned around and said, if you're suffering, it's real suffering. Some of the other parties saying, you're not suffering, if we have a coalition of working on different problems, we'll solve your problems. The bitterness in the UK was great. Wages have fallen to the lowest level since 1880 in Britain at the moment. In real terms, people's conditions since austerity can continue to fall all through the thousands. In other words, people are working longer hours and suffering. People come along and say, you know, who's to blame? Immigrants are to blame, or Muslims are to blame. And that's part of what's changed. The other thing that's changed is before, the Nazis were openly anti-Semitic in the UK. They switched very quickly to use the language of, there used to be a man called David Cameron, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, he used to be the Prime Minister of Britain, but we got rid of it, right? He was a Tory leader, and he used to make statements about migrants, being a bunch of migrants. When the refugee crisis happened, the state said, why should we help these people, and then we won't let them out. Do you know how many Syrians that the UK government let in? 212, and their children. If you compare that to Germany, to Austria, it's completely different. High levels of racism coming from the top of society. People keep saying it came from the bottom, but it was from the top of society that it was coming from. We had to counter the Islamophobia. What's the difference between France and Britain from where I live? About 100 miles, right? That's the distance, it's not far. But in France, have you noticed that the Front National came second in the election, and we're witnessing, I think that's a very frightening effect. Marine Le Pen, you know, the father, Marine Le Pen, and the daughter, right, they have gone through a period of what I call Eurofascism, and they call it de-demonization. How do you build a mass fascist movement without losing its core? So at the moment, the Front National has 50,000 members. It has, there are 3 MPs inside Parliament now. But that was a slow process from 1981 to the present day. But the Front National was smaller than the National Front in Britain. So why is it in Britain that the Nazis have gone back and in France have gone forward? It's not because the British are really nice, right? That they didn't have an empire. In Britain, people say we drink tea and we play cricket, yeah? So fascism will never come, right? Nevertheless, after the Second World War, the biggest fascist group in Europe was in the UK. And it was deeply rooted. A man called Mosley, who was part of the Black Shirts who met Hitler, seeded a movement. That's the reason why all fascist movements in Britain are seeded from that way. It's not because the British left is particularly clever or braver than any other the left in anywhere else. It is because we've understood the necessity of having what is described as a united front. And that is that people come together on a principle of stopping the far right from going forward. How does this work? The organisation I'm in has got one of the leaders of the Social Democratic Party, it's got the leaders of the Green, it's got all the big trade unions, and it's also got the left, it's also got some anarchist groups, people that vote, don't vote, all together, but we agree on a principle that we have to be anti-racist, but we also have to not allow the Nazis in order to build. And we analysed that on that basis. When the British National Party lost its seats, the Fascist Party started to be pulled around a group called the English Defence League. Who set up the English Defence League? They were set up by a group of shady politicians who met in Vienna actually. Years ago there was a meeting in Vienna of all the fascist groups, and they formed an organisation called Stop the Islamification of Europe. And these businessmen decided that the biggest threat facing Europe was the rise of what they said was Muslims organising. Now, to be honest, I don't think they actually believe that. I think it's part of the way they think of how they're going to build. Because if you said in the UK, I want to kill black people and I want to kill Jews, people would say, you're going to prison, right? If you say, I'm against terrorism, I'm against division, so the Nazis now come out and say, we want to unite against hate. But you're the haters, yeah? This goes back to an old tradition, or what Hitler had. Hitler, you know the name of the organisation, the Nazi movement? It was a national, because it was nationalism. It was workers, because they wanted to appeal to workers. It was socialist, because they wanted to pretend to be so. They pretend to be anybody, they were chameleons, they're opportunists. In other words, they stripped the symbols of the left, actually, and try and use them for themselves. That's their old tradition. And what we have to do is try and expose them. So the English Defence League started to march. Now, when they started to march, they walked with England flags and said they were patriots. When we said some of them they're trying to build a street movement, a fascist movement, you know what people said? Look at them, they look so English. They're so, let them be, they're working class. So what we had to do was mobilise counter-demonstrations. And when the counter-demonstrations came, all of them weren't big at first, some of them were small. But you know what's important is that I saw David on television. Some of us would go on television and say, these people are dangerous. And as they started to grow, they put 5,000 people on the street, they started to attack people. They attacked an LGBT shop. They attacked a Unite the Union, a trade union shop. They attacked mosques. They attacked Hindu temples. In other words, because they were confronted, the soft bits of them came to the forefront, and although they tried to build a mass movement, we were able to expose the hard bits. We were able to expose what they really were about. And that's because we mobilised against them, but importantly, we put the propaganda out about who they were. We found out what their names were, what they did. Their leader was a man called Tommy Robinson. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tommy Robinson. Actually, last week, he was in Poland, by the way, marching with the Nazis there. This is a man that said he wasn't Nazi, but he's marching with them and patting them on the back because they're using a plethora of different ideas in order to come and grow. And it's important that we understand that's part of the reason, that's how we're able to stop. I want to talk a little bit about what's the difference between a racist populist and a Nazi. If you look at Geert Wilders' organisation wants to be in Parliament, but its aim isn't to build a mass movement that builds the Nazis. But what's the impact to the far right? It pulls politics to the right. It makes unacceptable unacceptable. Look at the impact of the racist language of Trump at Charlottesville. He says there's some people who are marching saying we've got to get rid of the Jews, and there's some people marching against, and I'm not sure which side I'm on. It's shocking. And what's happening now with the racist, populists and the Nazis is they make shock politics. They say something which you think could never happen again, and they make the unacceptable acceptable. I was here when York Haider came as the FPO, and somebody put up a thing, York Haider equals Hitler, and it was a shockwave across the most of Europe. In fact, the FPO was scared to even mention. They said, we're nice people, we're friendly people. I go skiing. There was always pictures of York Haider skiing everywhere, do you mean? And wearing really tight clothes, and do you mean photo shops and model shops, yeah? And really what that was, and the way they reacted to it was not to put their hardcore anywhere near Parliament. They didn't wear the cornflower, they didn't wear anything like that. But what we're seeing as the impact of the crisis is that this polarisation is continuing and growing. And I think what we have to have is a strategy of having a united front to defend yourself, but also understanding why they're continuing to grow. I wanted to say something about in France. When Muslims were attacked, young girls wanted to wear the scarf. Lots of people have a position. I'm an atheist, right? But the job of anti-racists, anti-fascists, is to understand why somebody's being attacked. So it's no use saying that you're not going to join with them because you don't agree with those people. You have to join with people. The reason why Hitler was attacking Jewish people isn't because he didn't understand the importance of the Torah. He was trying to use it to divert people's attention. So you stand with people. And what people said was they're analysing each religion in order before they did it. The reality is, back in the 80s and the 90s, the growth of the Front National has gone in hand with the use of Islamophobia. Islamophobia has opened up an argument, I think, that's led to older racisms coming to the forefront that holds the part of fascists together. So for instance, in Poland, they burned an effigy of a Muslim refugee, but they also burned 2 years ago an effigy of a Hasidic Jew. And the reason why that's important, when I went to Poland, they said, we're worried about Muslim refugees. You know what's shocking? There were no Muslim refugees in Poland. They're not there. And certainly, when you went to the Jewish quarters, there were barely any Jews that were there. And actually, if you look at the rise of Hitler, the population of Jews in Germany is 75 million, or 75 million. What's the population of Jews? Less than 500,000, a million. So it wasn't to do with that. It was a strategy of how you combined anti-Semitism to hold together your core cadre in order to smash the democratic institutions of society. Now, I want to say that we can stop the Nazis. There's a danger when people see so many Nazi organisations across the world on far-right groups, you think you can't stop them, or racists. Do you know what the biggest problem for Nazis is? They're Nazis. And it's important to understand that. In other words, because they're against everybody, there's a chance of uniting everybody against them. When the EDL was marching in a place called Walthamstow, do you know who defeated them? Children. All these children came out, and not big, strong men, you know, we had big arguments. Got to be men, are you trained in MMA, do you know, can you do this, can you do that? Well, no, that's not what happened, right? Huge numbers of people came out and blocked the streets, said you're not walking down here. Before that, we had lots of demonstrations that weren't successful, but the demonstration itself broke their confidence. They didn't feel that they could do the same thing. And so that's really where we talk about building an organisation. That's how we built an organisation that began to push people back. I want to say that it's important to see that they don't just have a uniformed growth. They don't just keep growing and going back. They grow. Some organisations grow and then get pushed back. So at the moment, I think that you've seen, you know, organisations like the Vlaams Bloc go up and then go down. So it's not true they have uniform growth, but the line of march is towards growth. Right. And so the place where you are at right now is important for the whole of Europe. Because what's the aim, I think, of the FPO is to normalise their ideas together with the Conservative Party. Why do they want to do that with the Conservative Party? Because in fact, I've got to be careful because I know they keep suing you, yeah? You know, because they deny their past. Yeah? Who are you? We're not that, right? But you know, if you open them up and then you look inside them and you find out what they are, yeah, then you have to say what they are. But what they're trying to do is get respectability. They need respectability to serve them. Why? Because they need a mass movement. Fascism is a movement particularly of the middle class. If you look at the vote of the Front National, very importantly, there's very low turnouts, but what's been a consistent trend is what I call people that are of the middling sort, right, who've been affected by the crisis, the small shopkeepers, the small business people, are the core basis of the Front National. It doesn't mean that when you go to Calais, working class people aren't voting for them or unemployed people aren't voting for them. But their core class are two groups of people. Students, they've broken through amongst young people, and at the same time the middle class. It's very important that we expose this and break this process, because that's part of what happened. In the UK, one thing we did was make sure that the fascists couldn't organise in the colleges, or they faced such hard ideas that it made it difficult for them to develop a cadre, a group of people who could write, disseminate, speak articulately. I don't know if anybody's seen the alt-right in America and the way they dress in suits with flopped hair and and trendy and stuff like that. That's the other thing. The alt-right are reinventing the phrase about what it means to be a fascist or be a racist. But what's also happening, I saw the stuff in the United States, is a mass movement against them. I know it doesn't look, they don't show it on the television, but there's been not one successful alt-right demonstration that's taken place, because there's been a spontaneous mass of opposition to it. In fact, a poll came out that said that 25% of young people felt that because of the growth of the alt-right, that socialism or communism was an essential part of fighting on the campuses. I checked it because I didn't believe it. I don't mean that in negative anti-Americanism, but what I'm trying to say, there's an enormous movement being born, and an anti-racist movement which we're all part of. And the real battle is between which way we go. I saw the horrors in Auschwitz. I saw the direction of history where it could go in that way. But we also have to remember that Hitler never came to power by popular vote. I'm sick and tired of going to meetings in parliaments where they say Hitler won the vote. He didn't win the vote. He was handed power by Hindenburg. Mussolini never won the vote. He marched on Rome and he was allowed to come to power. Even at the midnight moment, they can be stopped, providing our side understands the tactics to employ, the size of organisation they've got to build, and they do not despair, but understand that they're the majority, and then they can begin to break through by uniting all those people that want to resist the fascists and talk about breaking them. I've only got a short period. I just want to say that there's a few things that don't work, and I want to be clear about this. One of the things that doesn't work is saying that we'll build a movement and it will only be made up of respectable people. I'm sorry to say that I'm not that respectable, right? But that's not a crime, right? What I mean by that is people say we have to have royalty involved. We have to have the tops of industry involved before we can move. I think that we had our organisation was bottom up. We need the top people. It was brilliant that the leader of the Labour Party in our country, a man called Jeremy Corbyn, came to our conference and said the fascists and the racists have to be opposed. And the second leader came as well. We needed that in order to organise. But what's really important is that you combine that with genuine activity on the ground. When we first started, some people said, don't march, stay away from them. You mean, don't say anything. That tactic didn't work. The other tactic was some people said, simply, we had a discussion amongst the anti-fascist movement about do autonomous groups attack, do small groups of us attack them. That didn't work. That didn't work either. So what we had to do was develop a genuine movement involving real people in order to build and in order to defeat them. It's paid dividends. It matters that the British National Party in the last election got 4,000 votes. It matters. It means that Nick Griffin, you know what he did? He moved from London to Hungary. I'm sorry for the Hungarians, yeah? But it's a good thing, it's a sign of defeat. And his organisation fell to bits. Tommy Robinson, he came on our demonstration on his own. right? Not with his 5,000 friends, yeah? Because they can be defeated. Now, we still face threats now. They're rebuilding. There's something called the Football Lads Alliance that's building a big group in order to build, and they will continue to march. The fascists won't be stopped simply by building an anti-fascist movement. I think we have to also say, you know, all my life, from the age of 12, I've seen the National Front, then the BNP, then the EDL. I would like to see a chance where I don't have to do this anymore. I'll come to Vienna to talk about history, do you mean, and drink coffee, do you mean, and talk to people and learn German properly, right? I think we have to be also the movement of hope, that in part of defeating the fascists, we talk about what type of society we want that relegates the chances of the gas chamber in terms of the way that they treated people, put into the dustbin of history. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to what you've got to say, because I think the movement that you're building here is critical to what's going to happen inside Europe. There's two big areas that matter about which way the far right go. It's true they're building in Hungary, it's true they're building in lots of other places, but France, Austria and Germany are the places in which they're targeting to build a kind of mass movement in order to build a growth. They're building in all the other places as well through those different methods, but we can stop them, so you're going to play a crucial role in that. And anything I can do to help and build and bring solidarity, then I will do. Thank you very much.